Snow came down in sideways sheets, a white blur that erased road, sky, and reason all at once. By the time we found the right cabin number, my hands had lost feeling somewhere around mile 4, and Maya was halfway between laughter and complaint. Her hair stuck out from under her beanie like static, and every breath between us came out visible, two ridiculous clouds of panic pretending to be adventure. The key jammed twice before turning. We pushed inside, tripping over the threshold, dropping bags in a wet heap, and slamming the door against the storm's fist. The silence that followed was thick, but not warm. The air had that raw, unheated smell of old pine and dust. I flicked the wall switch. Nothing. No power, she asked. Apparently, authenticity includes hypothermia. We both laughed, the kind of laugh that keeps your teeth from chattering. She kicked the rug toward the lone bed, wedged against the wall, covered in a quilt that looked older than either of us. There's only one? I asked. She checked her phone, waved the blank screen. No service, no heater, one bed. We're off to a cinematic start. I found a flashlight, its weak circle barely skimming the boards. We unpacked layers of sweaters, built a nest of spare blankets, and sat opposite each other like contestants on a survival talk show. My brain cataloged every reason not to notice how close her knees were to mine. Okay, she said after a shiver. No hito moves. We share the bed, keep from freezing. Practical. Totally not weird. Totally, I agreed, lying for sport. She smiled, small and certain, then slid under the blanket, curling toward the spot she'd left for me. Just get in, she murmured. I'm freezing. And I froze, for a completely different reason. Maya and I had been friends for close to 10 years, long enough for people to stop asking how it started and start taking the friendship as fact. We met the first week of college when the power went out in the freshman dorms. I cracked a dumb joke about campus safety drills. She laughed too loudly and handed me a flashlight. That sound, half defiance, half joy, became my compass for everything afterward. We slid into the kind of friendship built on shared sarcasm and mutual rescue missions. She once called me to fake an emergency so she could escape a doomed first date. I once asked her to pretend to be my girlfriend when my ex showed up at an alumni party. We were good at performance, terrible at pretending it didn't mean more than it did. Year after year, we collected stories that made everyone else root for us, but carefully filed them under platonic legend. There was the camping trip sophomore summer when we got lost in the Adirondacks, rationed granola bars, and argued about constellations until dawn. She teased that my navigation app had trust issues. I told her she'd follow any trail if the sign said adventure, even if it led to a bear den. When the rain hit, we huddled in the same sleeping bag for logistics, both pretending sleep came easily. Our dynamic was a seesaw, her impulsive warmth balanced by my sarcasm. She threw herself into life like gravity didn't apply. I analyzed before breathing. She'd drag me into spontaneity, midnight diner runs, drives with no destination, and I'd repay her by making sure we didn't crash while doing it. It worked because neither of us tried to fix the other. We just made our contradictions livable. After college, we became what grown UPS like to call consistent. Same city, separate apartments, careers that filled the weekday noise. I buried myself in editing work, safe, quiet, predictable. Maya became a travel nurse, carrying sunlight into places that forgot they needed it. Our schedules never synced perfectly, yet we always managed coffee catch UPS, the running group text full of memes, and an annual trip into the mountains whenever one of us needed to breathe. This trip was supposed to be the usual fix. Both of us newly single, bruised but pretending otherwise. A long weekend of recharging, as Maya put it. No expectations, no heavy talk, just snow, snacks, and pretending adulthood wasn't a full-time sport. Our rhythm was so well-rehearsed, I didn't even question the plan. Friendship had always been our constant, our chosen immunity. I'd watched her stumble out of relationships with men who didn't understand that her chaos was her charm, not a problem to solve. She'd watch me collect short-term girlfriends who lasted until they realized sarcasm was how I hid sincerity. After each breakup, we found each other again, like gravity clocking in for its shift. We'd eat takeout, watch bad movies, mock each other's taste, and patch the dents before moving on to new people who looked suspiciously like excuses. Our connection was too honest to risk and too easy to escape. We flirted like people who needed the illusion of distance, disguised affection as commentary. Nice sweater. You trying to impress me? Relax. You're not even near my type. Inside jokes folded over deeper confessions we never permitted to surface. That's why no one blinked when we booked the cabin. Two friends decompressing from city noise, from dating nonsense, from people who didn't get the joke. She joked we'd return enlightened, and I joked about buying matching mugs that said therapy fails, cabin succeeds. Somewhere between packing board games and emergency snacks, I stopped noticing the line we'd always tiptoed on. Maybe the city had made us numb. The honking, the endless errands, the reflex to fill every silence with productivity. Out here, the mountains offered nothing to hide behind except sky and cold air. Freedom outside, avoidance inside. That first night before the storm hit, we had sat on the cabin porch wrapped in blankets, half a bottle of wine between us, tracing shapes in the dark with our breath. She toasted the quiet. Feels good, right? Like the world pulled the plug for us. I remember nodding, trying not to think about how easily we worked in isolation, and how effortlessly I mistook her laughter for proof that I didn't need more. She looked out at the woods and said, "Sometimes you just have to drive far enough that no one expects you to answer texts." I agreed, pretending I didn't hear the sentence beneath it, the confession that maybe friendship was the only safe place we knew how to live. Because inside that safety, nothing ever demanded clarity. Until the heater broke. Until one bed. Until just get in, I'm freezing. By the time the storm sealed the front door shut, the cabin had switched from rustic to survival mode. Wind hurled loose snow against the windows, and the wooden beams groaned with the weight of impossible weather. Maya sat cross-legged on the bed, wrapped in 2 sweaters, nose red and shining. My phone displayed a single bar of service that kept taunting me and disappearing. "Well," she said through chattering teeth, "this is either childhood nostalgia or early hypothermia. Not sure which." I checked the heater again, tapping its metal casing as if encouragement might revive it. Nothing. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was the sound of cold creeping into the room. "Floor shouldn't be too bad," I said, grabbing a pillow. Classic wilderness sacrifice. You can tell everyone later I heroically froze near the dresser. She gave me that look, the one that peeled away bravado in a single glance. "Don't be ridiculous. It's warmth, not romance." Those are famous last words. Seriously, Ethan, we're adults. That last line sounded unconvincing even to her. She shifted under the covers, patting the empty half of the mattress like it wasn't a loaded gesture. "Come on," she said, tone softening. "I'd rather owe you a therapy session than a memorial." I hesitated only long enough to notice the tremor in her hands. Then I slid in, careful to stack the blankets between us like an emotional demilitarized zone. The bed springs groaned, their way of making sure we didn't forget the gravity of the situation. For the first minute, it was all strategy. Where to keep elbows, where to face, how to joke without breathing the wrong direction. Our laughter started easy, like static relief, while we adjusted layers and pretended we weren't silently calculating the inches of space between us. "See," she said after a moment, voice muffled inside the blanket. "Practical, exactly as promised. You sound 3/4 asleep already." I'm half anesthesia, half denial. We laughed again, but the sound came closer this time, less of a shield and more of a meeting point. Every breath we exhaled dissolved into the dim air like evidence. I lost track of words, lost track of time. Found myself memorizing her breathing as though rhythm could replace conversation. Minutes stretched. The glow from the dying flashlight painted shallow gold against the ceiling. Somewhere below, the wind reset the shutter slats with soft knocks, a metronome for everything we weren't saying. I thought about the dozens of nights we'd slept near each other in completely different contexts. Tents, couches, car seats on road trips. How none of them had ever felt like this. Too quiet, too heavy with possibilities we hadn't allowed before. Maybe distance had always done us a favor by pretending restraint was just geography. Here, there was no buffer. Maya's toes brushed my calf under the covers, an accident she didn't correct right away. Her laugh came quick, low, nervous. Saw the rebellion of bad circulation. "All good," I whispered, though good barely covered the voltage now moving through every cell of air between us. My pulse refused to match hers. It sprinted ahead like it wanted to test the floorboards. I rolled slightly onto my back to release tension. Her arm followed, the movement subconsciously. Out of the corner of my eye, the curve of her face softened into shadow. Her hair smelled faintly like wood smoke, and that vanilla lotion she insisted repelling insects in summer. I tried counting ceiling beams, a trick I'd used for insomnia. It lasted 2 beams before my brain switched to cataloging her breathing patterns again. "Still awake?" she whispered somewhere near my shoulder. Hard asleep with someone narrating frostbite statistics. "That was one time," she said, mock offense in her voice. And it was factually accurate. The banter steadied me, disguising the growing gravity. She shifted closer, just enough that our shared heat became deliberate. No hugging, no scripted romance, just this precarious comfort, the kind that tasted like déjà vu and danger all at once. The air thickened with things we couldn't define. There was nothing overt, no confession, no cinematic staring contest. But under the heavy quilts lived a fragile truce between 2 instincts, self-preservation and surrender. Every brush of fabric, Every nervous exhale made clear what we'd pretended not to feel for years. If love had weight, it was pressing gently now against my ribs. Words crowded my throat, ready to tumble out, but the wrong sentence could freeze everything worse than the temperature ever could. Her voice arrived again, quiet as the wind easing against the window. "You okay?" "Yeah, just figuring out how not to hyperventilate quietly." She chuckled, then turned slightly so her forehead met my shoulder. The contact was small, ordinary, and irrevocable. I didn't move. Outside, the storm roared itself tired. Inside, what replaced it was louder. Friendship pretending not to be love has its own kind of blizzard, one that melts from the inside out. Hours passed without the storm running out of ways to remind us who was in control. The roof crackled under the weight of snow, and the windows moaned as if the forest were trying to get inside. We had given up finding the line between warmth and closeness. Conversation became the compromise. Maya shifted beside me, voice soft in the dark. "So, tell me one real thing about your life lately." "No sarcasm, no deflection." "That eliminates most of my vocabulary," I said. But she only waited, eyes glinting faintly in the low glow of her phone's flashlight, propped on a nightstand with its dim beam acting like the world's shyest campfire. "Fine," I started. "I've been thinking about changing jobs. I'm good at what I do, but I hate who I am when I'm doing it. You ever notice that?" Her hum was quiet affirmation. "All the time. You're allergic to dissatisfaction. You turn it into busy work." "Maybe. No maybe about it," she said. "You're chronically careful. It's endearing and infuriating." I smiled in the dark. "Carefulness is self-defense." She rolled to face me. "Against what?" "Happiness." The question hit too close to dodge with humor, so I went for honesty. "Against all the disasters I can see coming." "Which, apparently, include sharing a bed with you." Maya snorted. "Right, because this is the hazardous part of our friendship. Physically speaking, we're breaking OSHA regulations. Emotionally speaking, we always have." That line hung there, daring either of us to clarify. Instead, we argued about who was taking more blanket. I accused her of hoarding. She countered that I slept like a windmill. Our laughter filled the tiny cabin in irregular bursts until the jokes began dissolving into breaths that ended too close together. Between silences, honesty kept sneaking through. She admitted she'd been lonely lately, not in a tragic way, just in the quiet stretches where the world stopped needing her. "People think nurses are good at company," she said. "But no one wants to be the reason we're free on a Friday. You make things better, so they forget you might need better too," I told her. She smiled, a small curve of lips visible even in the half-light. "And you," she asked, "still dating women who want to fix your wardrobe and your life?" I stopped pretending I was auditioning for anyone. "That's progress," she said lightly. "Still, your commitment issues could win awards." "Please." I declined at the last minute, out of principle. Her hand came to rest near mine under the blanket, not quite holding, just tracing air. The contact, or almost contact, was its own sentence. Tension inched upward the way dawn sneaks into a room, gradual but unstoppable. "You always do this," I murmured. "Make disaster feel like home." She blinked at me, eyes catching the faint wash of the flashlight's glow. For a heartbeat, she looked uncertain, as if searching for the punchline that wasn't coming. Then, very quietly, "Maybe you were home." The words settled between us, shy but irreversible. I couldn't even pretend to breathe evenly after that. Neither of us looked away. The world outside could have vanished, and we would have stayed suspended in that milky half-light. Memory broke into the silence like warm air under a closed door, flashbacks overlapping tonight's rhythm. A graduation party years ago when she nearly kissed me. We'd been dancing badly, laughing worse, and the DJ switched to a slow song by accident. She stepped close, eyes mischief bright, and leaned in until someone spilled a drink and the moment evaporated. We never spoke of it, but it whistled between our jokes for years. Then the pattern, gatherings where we left early because we were tired, walks home that lasted longer than conversations with the people inside. All those practice versions of intimacy disguised as friendship drills. Back in the present, she yawned, nervous, not sleepy, and started humming to break the weight of her own words. I recognized the tune, the stupid pop song we always rewrote parody lyrics for on road trips. The familiarity steadied me like a handrail. "Still humming under pressure," I said. "Still teasing to survive," she countered. Then, quieter, "You ever think we've been rehearsing for this for years?" "For what?" I asked, knowing perfectly well. She shrugged under the covers, smile trembling between fear and teasing. "For accidentally telling the truth." "I'm aware," I said. "You whistle warnings. I translate them too late. Because carefulness is self-defense." I finished with her, our voices aligning. Her fingers brushed my wrist, quick and unsure. My immediate instinct was stillness, giving the moment space to decide if it wanted to exist. It did. We stayed in that invisible handhold, breathing in sync until the storm's roar softened to polite applause. Maya laughed suddenly, a fragile sound trying to steady itself. This is ridiculous. We could have frozen, and at least one of us is blushing like a teenager. Two of us, I admitted. She rolled on her back. I guess irony finally got bored of protecting us. Neither of us spoke again for a while. I lay there thinking how strange it was that affection could survive a decade of disguises only to announce itself next to a broken heater. Our friendship had always been motion, running, deflecting, joking, but in this stillness the truth arrived exactly when movement failed. When I glanced sideways, she was watching me, face half hidden in shadow, smile barely there. The phone's flashlight caught her eyes enough for me to feel seen. Caught. Neither of us looked away. Outside, the storm exhaled a final gust, then quieted. Inside, everything we'd hidden stretched awake. I found my voice, or maybe it found me. You know, I said, for someone terrified of change, you're handling this well. I'm improvising. That's new. Yes, she whispered, but so is this. Her tone had softened from banter to something else entirely. A few inches and a lifetime separated us. We did nothing to close the gap, and still it vanished. The heater gave one stubborn wheeze, coughed out a last ghost of warm air, and died for good. The hum that had cradled our nerves all night evaporated, leaving only the rhythmic knock of snow against the cabin walls. The silence that followed was startling, like time had paused specifically to take sides. Maya's teeth chattered once. There goes our last line of defense. Other than complaining, I offered. She smiled, weak but valiant. That was plan B. I shifted closer automatically, my instinct equal parts concern and gravity. She'd been shivering for minutes, valiantly pretending not to. Snow pressed harder against the window, plastering intricate frost flowers on the glass. In their pale reflection, her face looked both familiar and newly fragile. Still not freezing? I asked. False bravado, she said through a trembling laugh. Move over, heater replacement unit. She scooted nearer until our legs touched beneath the layers of blankets. The impact of that small movement stole every easy remark I had loaded. My breath came short. Hers fogged softly in the faint lantern light. I warned you, I whispered. Once you cross the protective blanket line, you forfeit all plausible deniability. Fine, she said, softer. Let me on my record. Humor tried to hold steady. It quivered once and disappeared. The pulse against my arm was so close now, it changed my own. Every heartbeat was translation. Each exhale, confession. We stayed still, neither knowing where to put our hands. My mind searched for safer ground. Weather updates, awkward jokes, but words refused duty. Finally, I said the thing I'd spent a decade rehearsing away. Maya, I've been scared to ruin what we have. She shook her head, eyes glossy from the flickering light. You idiot, she whispered, more affection than anger. Guess we already did. The corner of her mouth curled, half laugh, half relief. I laughed too, quietly because there was nothing else left to hide behind. She looked at me, completely unguarded now, as lightning split across the window. For one flash, the cabin was bright as day. We were statues, every unmade decision suddenly traced out in high relief. When the dark returned, the air was charged with the afterimage of honesty. Her fingers found my wrist first, feather-light but deliberate. Ethan, she said, voice caught somewhere between warning and invitation. Yes. She swallowed. Stop analyzing. I did. The distance between us collapsed so slowly it didn't feel like moving at all. The first kiss wasn't cinematic. It was cautious, almost clumsy in its reverence, as if each of us feared startling the moment into ending. Her lips were cold at first, then not. My hand rose to her cheek without logic, hold gentler than it needed to be. Outside, thunder rolled through the valley, deep, approving. The flash through the window turned our joined silhouettes silver for the briefest instant before darkness reclaimed everything. But something had broken open. When we finally pulled apart, breathless and stunned, she pressed her forehead against mine. So, she murmured, voice shaking, this is what reckless feels like. Better than advertised, I said, smiling with something closer to surrender than triumph. She laughed quietly, fingers still tangled in the sleeve of my sweater. We should probably panic tomorrow. Tomorrow feels far away. Good, she whispered. The thunder faded, leaving only rain. The bed creaked as we settled again, smaller movements now, her head tucked under my chin, my arm instinctively around her. Neither of us used the word love, but it hung in the cabin like a living thing, awake and patient. Outside, the storm softened into a steady lullaby. Inside, we stopped pretending comfort wasn't the same language as love. Morning arrived like an apology, soft light creeping through frost-blurred glass, replacing the storm's fury with a hush so complete it felt borrowed from another world. The snow outside had stitched the landscape into one seamless white sheet. Inside, the only movement came from the slow rhythm of two people forgetting how to be separate. Maya stirred first. Her hand rested on my chest, fingers tracing the absent beat of stress we'd carried for years. It wasn't an embrace so much as a reality check. When she opened her eyes, the recognition in them landed somewhere between what did we do? And finally, I broke the silence with the safety net of humor. For the record, your survival instincts are impressive. She half laughed, half groaned. You mean cuddling as a life-saving strategy? Field-tested, peer-reviewed, wildly successful. Maybe we should publish the findings, she said, sitting up and stealing the blanket in one motion. Her hair looked like the aftermath of an affectionate crime scene. We busied ourselves with pretend ordinary things. Coffee brewed on the camping stove, snow brushed off boots, the ritual of packing up as if last night fit neatly in a zipped bag. A tiny avalanche of laughter returned with every clumsy task. Me searching for missing socks, her teasing about my tragic bedhead. But each laugh ended differently now. Unguarded, too warm to toss away. When she caught me staring across the room, she grinned, that new version of familiar. What? Nothing, I said, just recalibrating reality. She slung her backpack over one shoulder. So what now, Professor Careful? I met her gaze. Hot showers. Honesty. Her answering smile lingered longer than the echo of thunder ever had. The drive down was steady, slow enough for silence to stretch comfortably. Every glance out the window flashed the memory of night. Lightning, laughter, that thin line we'd finally crossed without breaking. By the time we reached the city limits, she had commandeered the playlist, singing off-key to prove control of the atmosphere, one hand drumming against the seat next to mine. My neck hurt from smiling too long. In the weeks that followed, new habits unfolded like they'd been waiting for permission. Shared breakfasts that turned into lunches, text threads that ended with come over instead of see you. Even our friends began piecing it together, watching the conversation shift between us from comedic double acts to something easy and open. One evening, our closest circle gathered for dinner. Halfway through dessert, someone finally asked the question, "Okay, when exactly did this happen?" Maya smirked. During extensive survival testing. They all laughed. Only I knew the entire syllabus of that joke. Later, alone at my place, though it was ours by accumulation, she curled on the couch with a blanket, legs crossing mine. You realize the cabin's a metaphor now, right? For what? For everything that needed to break, so we'd finally stop hiding behind just friends. I nodded, letting her words sink in with the soft hum of the city outside. Then here's to broken heaters. Exactly, she said, clinking her tea mug against my coffee. In the quiet that followed, the cabin story became our private shorthand. Whenever life edged toward chaos, one of us would lean close and whisper, "Don't make me freeze alone," and the other would answer, "Not possible anymore." It's strange how a broken heater fixed everything else. 10 years of friendship, of controlled laughter and polite distance, unraveled in one night of frozen air and too little space. I used to think love arrived like weather, sudden and unpredictable, something you run for cover from or get caught beneath by accident. But it turns out it doesn't sneak in at all. It waits. Patiently, quietly, just outside the door of whatever we're busy guarding, asking for permission. Maybe that's what warmth really is. The moment we stop treating comfort as something fragile, start recognizing it as proof we already belong. I realized every joke, every long drive, every near miss and see you next weekend was just love rehearsing for its line. It wasn't melting away. It was building foundation, one ordinary habit at a time. Love doesn't arrive with storms. It survives them. Have you ever discovered the love you thought would melt away was actually what kept you warm all along?